So let's kind of revert back to, I know you've kind of struggled with depression. Can you just share a little bit about your journey with depression?
Yeah, so like you mentioned, this summer of 2022, can't believe we're in 2022,
21.
will be that'll be 11 years of recovery from anorexia. Personally, I believe I'm fully recovered. I don't struggle with it anymore at all. And before that, I was really struggling with suicidality. I mean, I was thinking about every single day leaving the planet. I was always kind of formulating in the back of my mind. I grew up extremely bullied, like my entire life. You know, my childhood was very traumatic. There were a lot of factors growing up that I just didn't feel like life was worth living. So when I got to my 20s, I had developed anorexia, but I didn't know that I was living with it. And so, anorexia has the highest mortality rate of any eating disorder or mental illness because your brain's not getting the nutrients it needs because you're restricting so much. So I went to a place that was very, very dark. So I had already struggled with depression so much. And then I went to a place where I was like, okay, I'm kind of done here. There was like this spiritual intervention that happened. I ended up checking myself into treatment and really started this healing process. I was blessed enough to go to a treatment center that was very holistic. So I learned like all the Western medicine, all the Eastern medicine, I had already been using EFT, but they taught us EFT for aftercare. So I had really worked through like a lot of my trauma. So that point moving forward, like depression wasn't really something that I lived with anymore. It would come up sometimes. Like I had been bullied online when I started my business, which is a whole other story.
That's horrible.
And that kind of triggered some depression. But, overall, like I'm a mental health coach. I've helped women heal from eating disorders. I've taught EFT to tens of thousands of people. Like I'm very passionate about recovery and using my tools to live a recovered lifestyle. So January of this year, when I was like hit with a wall of like debilitating depression, I was like scared.
I'm just going to pause you there. So when you say debilitating depression, what was going on? What were your symptoms? So like, those who are out there who they're like, I don't even know what to explain or what this feeling is. And we can identify it and say, well, this seems or sounds like, you're in the depressed state.
Yeah. So I really just was stuck in a negative thought spiral that I couldn't get out of. And I just felt like everything is hopeless, like the world is going to shit, like it's the end times. I used to feel more hopeful, like, oh, I'm here, I'm a light worker, I'm here to help heal the world. We're going through this, evolution in consciousness. We're just sorting through like the dark side of the soul. But I was just like, this is pointless. Like nobody cares about me. Like, no one's going to notice if I'm not here. I was so fatigued all the time. I was just really bad brain fog. Like I couldn't focus. And it got to a point where I was not functioning. Like I was not able to take a shower. I was not able to, definitely not work. I mean, it was just horrible. And I was having like crying spells and breaking down and crying and just feeling like, what's wrong with me? Like, I don't feel like myself. I just can't change my thoughts, and none of my tools were working. And I mean, like I said, I'm doing pretty good with my tools. So I was like scared because I just didn't understand what was going on. And then it really, I think, hit, a scary moment when I just realized that, if people don't look for the signs and don't understand the signs of depression, then I think that it's hard because people will say, like people said to me, well, how am I supposed to know you're struggling if you don't tell me? And I'm like, well, when you're depressed, you're not going to go out and be like, yo, I'm depressed. Like, can you help me? Like you're stuck in a dark world. You feel hopeless. You feel alone. And so I really feel like it's almost part of our community and family's job to be checking in with each other, checking in with your friends and like, hey, how you doing? Because with social media, it creates this illusion that we're all so connected, but are we really? And like, I realized like, if I stopped messaging people on Facebook, nobody was messaging me. And that fed back into that cycle of like, well, nobody cares about me. No one's going to notice if I'm gone. And it just, hearing those thoughts, it kind of just snapped me into like, oh shit, like I need help. Like I can't get out of this. And I totally broke down to my mom and was like, I don't know what to do, but this is scary and it's heading in a really dark direction and I need help.
Wow, that's powerful right there. And one of the things you just said is, we are kind of connected on social media. Everybody's liking posts, but you really don't know, right? Just because I'm liking your post doesn't mean I know you, right? A lot of times we feel like we know people because we're watching their lives unfold on Instagram or any other social media networks, and so that was very critical. One of the things you also mentioned is that being connected, right? So we've seen in the past 2 years, how we were all forced to be isolated. If you're single and living alone, that's even that was really, really challenging.
That's me. And it's been so hard.
And
I'm an extrovert. So
yeah. Oh my gosh.
So difficult.
Yes, and especially for the introverts too, because you're used to being by yourself, but this was another level of being by yourself. You were forced to. It was almost like if you went out, you weren't sure if you were going to survive or not. And so, a lot of times I did quite a few talks during that, that time period where we're, asking people, just check on your neighbor, check on your friends, make sure you're doing a FaceTime check or, a video kind of check. Just to see, because just because you're texting and talking doesn't necessarily mean you know what's really going on. And you kind of mentioned that, like, your friends are like, well, how am I supposed to know if you're depressed if you don't tell me?
I don't mean to roll my eyes. It's just that, like, if you don't understand depression, and I get it, like, and that's something I'm passionate about that I want to speak to more, is like helping people understand like how to help somebody who's depressed, and something to empower someone who is depressed in order to get the help they need. Because my biggest challenge and what was a red flag for me was like, I did not want to reach out. And I'm generally pretty good at that. Like when I went through a breakup and I was like in it, just like so just sad about it, I knew I need to reach out. I need some support. And I wanted to isolate. I didn't want to talk to anybody. And that's a huge part of depression, is like you just don't want to be around people.
I'm gonna throw a question out to those who are watching, and whoever watches later down the line, is how many people like really, truly, honestly check out and reach out to others, and how often are you doing that? So, we talk about depression, you're feeling like certain symptoms. So you're, poor energy, poor concentration, low appetite, it could be high or so, but, there is that, just feeling like you said, amotivation, you feel really helpless, hopeless, any one of those things, and you begin to have those suicidal thoughts rolling in. And for us as psychiatrists, we have a time period as well. So if you're feeling any of those symptoms within a 2-week period, it's actually defined as the definition of depression. And so in those 2 weeks, how many people are checking in regularly? People are like, oh yeah, I spoke to her. Oh gosh, it's been 3 weeks. Oh my goodness. And so much can happen in 3 weeks. So, and that's why it's important to have your own community. And I know I say that, but it's a difficult place if you're quiet person, introvert, but you still want to kind of make your own community. If you have family, that's always very good. And if you don't, then you want to create your own space and something that would work, a networking of folks that can kind of be like, hey, we're a brother's keeper. We're checking in, look, just to see how you're doing today. Because, we know that the essence of psychiatry is connectedness. Everything that has to do is connectedness. So if we're not connected as individuals, we fall into that hole and that dark place that you sort of mentioned in there. So that's amazing. So so guys, if you're listening to this and anyone who normally, they're really outgoing, they're the first to call, and check on you. Oh my God, I saw this post. Where did you get that outfit from? Something, they're typically outgoing, or they're just not, this is their nature, who they are. And all of a sudden they're kind of, they just turn a shell inwards, right? And no longer communicated. They've kind of gotten quiet. You're texting them, you're not getting the response that, you would normally get. Pick up the phone and call them. If you can go to their homes, definitely do that, but definitely make extra efforts to that. And one of the things I always say is being intentional when you ask someone, how are you doing? I cannot stress that enough, because we can all look glam, right? And who can tell that you're sick, right? No one can tell that. Except we say, well, guess what? I was in the hospital today. I got IV fluids, but hey, I'm here because I promised you I'm going to be here live, and so no one knows that. And so I really feel like, we have to kind of ask a little, we have to really, really mean it when we ask and go the extra mile. That's amazing.
Yeah, I did have an experience where someone, really, it was so obvious when they called me that it was an inconvenience, and it made me feel so much worse, because I'm like, oh, see, look at that, I'm just an inconvenience to people, you know, so like you're saying, it's so important to have that intention. And the other thing that you brought up as far as, you know, some of us are just really good at showing up and putting on a face, and someone can be depressed and like you don't even know it. And I'm such a believer in the power of the universe and synchronicities and these messages that we get from our higher self, whatever you want to call it. And when you have that thought of like, oh yeah, I haven't talked to so-and-so in 3 weeks, it takes 30 seconds to write a text message and just be like, hey, I'm thinking about you. Literally, like truly a sentence can save a life. Like I 100% believe that. And if you have that thought, just send them a text. Because how many times do we think about somebody, but we don't act on it? And that they might be like the universe trying to tell you like, hey, this person needs you, and or just needs to know that somebody cares. And so, you know, I think if we can start doing that as humans, just in general, and like pick 5 people, like who are the 5 people that you love the most, that you're the closest to, and just keep an eye on them. If you know, if you haven't heard from them in 2 weeks, like reach out and ask that they do the same for you too. Like have this conversation, because with COVID and now everything that's happening on the other side of the world, like we need each other more than ever right now. So we have to be proactive as far as that goes.
Absolutely. And I see a question here that is just phenomenal. And before I answer the question, I'm going to tell you the answer is yes, because I remember having, you know, a conversation with someone, and they told me they were at the party of their life. You know, they were having so much fun. They're like the, you know, the person of the party, right? The life of the party right there. But they were thinking of how they could, you know, they couldn't wait to get home to kill themselves.
Well, look at someone like Robin Williams.
Yes.
You know, like,
yes,
absolutely.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
And so, you know, the question is, you know, whenever you guys choose to ask, can someone seem happy and also suffering with depression, or can you cover up depression with laughter and false? You absolutely can. But it's best to, if someone truly cares and asks you, that's your opportunity right there, right? Nobody's a psychic. You know, we say we're psychiatrists, we're trained to look at alpha symptoms, but we can't read minds, right? And so, you know, if you're feeling down, then don't pretend, you know, reach out. And I love the fact of what you said is, you know, have your circle of friends and say, you know what, I'm going to check in on you. Please do the same for me. And I think during this time, these are very uncertain times, you know, so if you don't have that network, you really don't want to create that, you know, so that's amazing.
Thank you for watching the Dr. Tola Show. I'm sure you've enjoyed this episode, which has been educational, inspiring, and bringing more mental health awareness on the Dr. Tola Show. Make sure you go ahead and subscribe right here. If you don't want to miss anything that we're doing, anything we're talking about, stories that are more inspiring, that educational, make sure you continue to subscribe on the link here. Thank you guys. Dr. Tola.